and welcome to everybody who's come this evening. I think we've got an interesting evening. I hope you're going to enjoy it.
I remember another patient who we both looked after who, was in a relationship with a chap, getting serious, thinking about starting a family. And I remember her bringing him to clinic, him getting tested, them coming back to get the results. He was trait. This was one of our patients who had sickle cell disease, and she dumped him in the room.
Yes, she did.
Dumped him in the room in front of
us.
I remember.
And I said, Mummy, I'd never let you get a vaccine that is not safe. So I'll be the first one there, and then once I've had it, you can have it. And I remember this text message coming back to me while I was at work, where you'll be the first to die. But every touch point, be talking to women about the importance about having the vaccine. And if you don't have information, say that to somebody. I don't have the information. Can I pass it on to the person that can?
Some women are saying that they're actually having a really positive breastfeeding experience because their situation of having to stay at home and not having lots of visitors round and not feeling they have to rush about everywhere means they've actually got the excuse almost to sit on the sofa and just breastfeed their baby.
So Black and brown women and birthing people are not treated with equity, leading to unacceptable levels of morbidity and mortality. They then become marginalised communities that become mistrusting of maternity services, and they might be reluctant to engage because their initial experience has been negative. We then label them as difficult and unwilling to engage, and the cycle of substandard care continues.
It's really difficult to describe really what makes continuity happen, but there is some real magic in the depth of relationship that you have with a woman and her family, and it's really beyond articulation. We know it works. It definitely works for our women and our families, and if you always put them in the very centre of what you do and how you work, that is when the magic happens.
One of the benefits, I think, of
So this is what's called a hybrid event. There are people in the room, there are people watching in groups around the country, and there are people still watching in their pyjamas at home. Good morning, Sue, how are you?
Good morning. I'm fine, Neil. Thank you very much. It's fantastic to be here.
My argument is that the solution is health optimization. Prevention is far better than cure.
And I think there is a real risk that services that are lost or reduced during the time of COVID are not restored.
And I hope that you can take valuable insights from today. And if you're listening tonight, or if you're listening next week or next month, take valuable insights from the speakers from today and share the word, share the positive messages with your colleagues, because in these dark times, in these challenging times, everybody needs a green shoot and a pearl of wisdom. Thank you very much, and we are in this together. We stand united together.
And welcome this evening to this evening's Maternity and Midwifery Hour. Welcome everybody who's called in. Come in to us. This is now the 9th episode of the 5th series. I feel like one of these box set aficionados, but that's where we're at the moment. My name's Sue MacDonald, and I'm the curator for this hour and also the Maternity and Midwifery Festivals. And it's my pleasure to be chairing tonight with our lovely guests. Now, many of you will know these hours were designed around when COVID hit the health service, and we really wanted to provide some continuing professional development and some contact and links for midwives, student midwives, aspiring midwives, people who are working in maternity services, including and mums also. And they've carried on because I mean, COVID is still with us, very sadly, but it's been very good to be able to have links with all our lovely midwives and all our lovely students. So it's fantastic. And of course, this is all accessible. So if you miss any snippets today, you can catch up, and you just need to access Matflix, who look after the kind of recording of all of the sessions that are done. And this is a fantastic resource. And if you haven't explored it, if you're a student or if you're a midwife preparing something for revalidation, this is where you need to go to get lots of up-to-date information and resources for CPD and revalidation. Now, this evening, I'm absolutely thrilled. I'm being joined by two wonderful student midwives, Deepa Santosh and Nicolette Porter, to talk careers a little bit. I've only given them a short time, so we might have to have them back because I know they'll have a lot to say. And being a student midwife and some of the pleasures, the joys, and some of the challenges that they're meeting these days. But of course, with all our guests, what we start with is that moment of the week. So I'm going to ask each of them for a moment of the week, and I'll start with Deepa for her moment of the week.
Hi Sue, hi everyone. Moment of the week tomorrow is Diwali, so you can see my lights there in my study. And I'm really excited. I think it's the first year where I'm actually at home because I've been working all these years. So I'm going to try and do some mehndi. And my son's coming home. He's only in London, not too far away, but as a mom, yeah, he's coming home too. So I'm excited about Diwali tomorrow.
Wonderful. That's fantastic. Thank you so much. That's quite a big event, isn't it?
Yeah.
To share. Thank you for that. How about Nicolette?
Yeah, my moment of the week was a couple of days ago. I had a lovely normal delivery that I was so happy to facilitate. So it was number 23 for me. So I'm really getting into the numbers now on the way to the 40.
Wonderful. That's a lovely moment, isn't it? With no complications or difficulties. Fantastic. Well done, Nicolette. Thank you, both of you, for sharing your moment of the week. That's fantastic. Now I'm just going to go on into the next bit of the session, keeping an eye on the time, of course. And I want to say, as we always do, send good wishes to those of you who might be feeling unwell or recovering from COVID. But also, I want to say a big thank you to our wonderful people in the NHS and all the services at the moment. It's still going on, and because people are sick, and there's added stress to everyone in the service. So thank you for everything you're doing, and just keep up and keep strong and care for yourselves. And I always say that as well. I think it's really important. And there is a lot of pressure within the maternity services, and we're getting a lot of that on things like the social media. And I'm very aware that it is a hard time for student midwives and for midwives. So I hope we can help some way to just give a little bit of space for people to just think a different place anyway. Also, I want to say thank you to all the people who are vaccinating. People aren't saying so much of that now, but of course, the vaccinations are going on. The people are having their boosters now, and the flu vaccine as well. So there's a lot of activity going on. And I know that a lot of midwife colleagues are actually participating in some way in that program. So thank you to all of you doing that. Okay, so I'm moving on a little bit to the news. I'm speaking very quickly. Forgive me for that, but I want Nicolette and Deep to have lots of time. So I'm going to move quite fast. Now, we're very excited because next week very student experience festival. Fantastic. If you haven't registered for this, you better get a move on, because otherwise you might miss the boat. It's very exciting. There's also the Education Lists Festival as well. So the two is going on at the same time. There's some shared session. I know Jackie Dunkley-Bent, our Chief Midwife Advisor, will be speaking. So that's going to be shared by students and by the lecturers and educators. So that's fantastic. I'm going to talk more about the students festival, because we've got students here, and I know that many people who are listening in this evening are students also. And I just want to reiterate, it's the biggest gathering of student midwives joining online. It's all online, but what is happening, it's not just people sitting at home. There are going to be people sitting at home, but there's also going to be lots of people sitting in the universities in little parties and big parties. And I hope it's going to be a really good experience for everybody to really feel as though they're part of something that it's special, because they are. It's going to be really superb. So if you're watching and you're a lecturer and you want to really help your student midwives to set up a watch party, and that might just be to watch, a couple of hours of the day, we've got lots and lots of guidelines for you, and that's on the resources sheet that's come out with this hour. So do have a look at that. Also, there's a little survey for student midwives to fill in, and there's a prize. Not for everybody, but there is a prize. So do fill in that survey and you might get a prize. And that's it. But keep alert, get registered. If you can't watch the whole thing or participate in the whole thing, remember all of our events are recorded, so you can catch up later. But of course, I have to say it's much more exciting if you're there on the day, because you get it really fresh and it's very exciting. You can join in the chat and all that sort of thing. It's fantastic. So just a couple of bits of snippets. We've got the new continuity of care statement from the International Confederation of Midwives. That's on your resource list. Next year's International Day of the Midwife theme is 100 years of progress, which is about right for midwives. We're always at the front there. And thank you to Maeve, the lovely Maeve, for alerting me to that. It's fantastic. And it's World Prematurity Month this month, and Prematurity Day on the 17th of November. And it's a real time to remember all those little babies that are born before their time, and the importance of making sure that mums and babies aren't separated. And we've learned quite a lot over the COVID period about how important it is to keep mum and baby together. We always knew, but it's just reiterated it. And thank you for Deepa for reminding me that it was Diwali. It is Diwali tomorrow. I got very confused in my brain and thought it was tonight, but it's tomorrow. So happy Diwali to everybody. Now I can take a breath and I can say, now we're going to move now to looking at our main event, which is our careers and pathways, and thinking about next week also. This is linking a little bit to think about, well, what makes someone want to become a midwife? Is it easy to get onto a midwifery course? And what's it like being a student midwife these days? Now, some of you who are watching might have trained a long time ago. Some of you might be training now. Some of you might finish your education program a couple of years back. But so it's all, you need to know it's always changing. But we wanted to invite Nicolette and Deepa to share snippets from their lives so we can understand things a little better. Now I'm going to start with Nicolette Porter. I'm delighted to introduce Nicolette. She's now in her third year in Middlesex University. She's also a student ambassador for Capital Midwife and also co-editor of the Student Midwife Journal. I just don't know how she fits everything in, I have to say. She's passionate about promoting inclusive individualised care and sharing knowledge, informing midwifery practice to her fellow students, which is why she's the journal editor. She's also got a special interest in improving the experience of autistic women and birthing people using maternity services, and she's going to do a dissertation on that. So I'm sure she'll be looking for tips from people who might be watching tonight. She's Also, she's had the Council of Dean Student Leadership Programme. She's a part of that, and she's a Wilkes Education Scholarship winner, and she's one of the shortlisted candidates for Nursing Times Student Midwife of the Year. Very exciting. So I'm really delighted that Nicolette's been able to join us this evening. So welcome, Nicolette. The screen is now yours.
Thank you very much, Sue. Thank you very much. Yes, so as I said, my name is Nicolette and I'm a third year student midwife. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about just my pathway into midwifery and my experiences thus far as a student midwife, really. So I actually have a background in psychology. And so after sixth form, I did 1 year of my psychology degree and I really enjoyed it. I really loved it. I found it very interesting. But I really did just feel called to midwifery. And it was just this thing in my back of my head that I knew this is what I need to do. So this kind of process happened very quickly for me. So I decided to apply for midwifery and it was all quite fast. So I applied through clearing, which if anyone doesn't know, it's like a second application round outside of the normal application season where you can apply. So I got a personal statement, I got a reference, and I applied through UCAS to do my course. And now because my A-levels were fairly recent and within subjects that were quite relevant to midwifery, like biology, I didn't need to do an access course, but that's another option that other people do go through as well. So while on the topic of personal statements, I would say that for any listeners who are prospective midwifery students, a particular tip I would give for personal statement writing is that try to incorporate any previous life experiences that you've gained, even if you've not had work experience in a hospital, because I know it's hard to get those sometimes. Any like public facing roles that you've had life experience doing can be relevant to midwifery. So try in your personal statement to link those back. If you've worked in retail, if you've worked in hospitality, you've had to explain concepts and of your services to the public. You've had to show professionalism. You've had to deal with conflict resolution, maybe. And those things are all things that we do in midwifery practice when you're not only just caring for the women or birthing person in your care, you're looking after their family members, their birth partners. You're dealing a lot with the public. So try and integrate that into your personal statement a little bit. Another thing I would mention is that I had to interview to get onto the midwifery course. And in your interviews, they kind of delve into what you understand the role of the midwife to be and what different professionals that you may work with in your midwifery career. So they try to make sure that you have a full understanding of the role of the midwife. So now I'm going to talk a bit about my current midwifery experience. And honestly, it has been a long journey. And it's been a long journey to self-confidence a lot of the time. So as a student who trained during the COVID times, I can say that our education was quite interrupted by the current world affairs. And as a first year, trying to, get to grips on normal intrapartum care, it's not easy when there's the added complexity of a person in your care being COVID positive potentially. So just trying to understand how the normality is when it's such a not normal time, it can be a bit difficult. So I would say it was daunting at the start. And even just learning your way around the hospital, knowing where everything is, it takes a while. So if someone asks you to go and get something or go and get this and you don't know where that is, it can be a problem. So I did want to emphasize that whenever you start a new placement area, try to ask for a brief orientation and where emergency equipment is, or if there isn't even time for that, just as soon as you even enter a room, mentally scan the room, see where the towels are kept, where the stuff for taking blood is kept. Is there any relevant equipment that you might need in the room? And if it's not, can I get it now rather than when it might be, I need to get this now in an emergency style situation. So just try and prepare in those things so that you're not doing it in a rush. Another example of that is they have those drawers that are there are 5 drawers to them and they have a lot of things in them. Like the first drawer might have blood bottles, the second drawer might have syringes and needles, the third drawer might have stuff for cannulation. So someone might say, oh, go and get a 10 ml syringe and you're faffing about searching through all the drawers, not knowing which one they're in. So I would say just take a while when you enter the room to scan the location of things that are commonly asked for items, so that in an emergency when someone needs something, you're not rummaging around trying to find them. So that's just a tip that I'd say for a newly starting student midwife. So like I was saying, I'm definitely still on the journey of developing confidence as a student. And I think that these things come with putting yourself out there more. For every experience that you are offered, you need to take it and you need to try and learn through doing, because you can't fully learn something from a textbook. I'm the kind of person that really loves to try and read about something and try to understand everything I can from the background before I start a situation. But that's not how midwifery always is. Of course, you need to have contextual knowledge and understand things around the area, but you need to kind of just go for it sometimes and believe yourself and get involved and challenge yourself every day. And there will still be moments where you're like, I still don't know this, or I still can't do that. But ultimately, you know, the way you can see that you truly are developing is reflection. And I know it might sound like an overused word in midwifery, but it really is important to do. And I found it a really important skill over the course of my midwifery degree so far. So this is a particular tip I learned from my personal tutor, Emily, who's helped me so much throughout this year. And she told me to do a reflection at the end of each midwifery degree, or even more regular than that. And you can really see when you do that how much you're progressing. So if you ever have those self-doubt thoughts, oh my gosh, I still don't know this, I still don't know that, look at your last reflection and see how you felt. And then you'll realize, oh wow, I am indeed progressing. I've developed a lot from that stage, even only 3 months ago. Okay, so moving away from clinical practice tips and more towards how to achieve academic success in a midwifery degree, I would say that time management is key. So our degree is split 50% theory, 50% practice. And I don't know about anyone else, but when I do a 12-hour shift, I don't feel like coming home and reading a textbook. So it's really important to learn how to manage your time so that on your days off, you have done all of your assignments and are not cramming things in at the last moment. So for us, we do like maybe a month or so in theory and a month or so in placement. And not every university is the same in the way that they organize their course, but look at your course and try to tailor what I'm saying around that. And there will be times where you have an assignment due straight after you come back from a long placement block. But if you know that you're being in placement that entire time, are you really going to be able to dedicate your time fully to writing that essay to the best of your abilities? Maybe not. So it's really important to use your theory times as theory times and to use your placement times as placement times. So when you're in theory, even if you know this essay isn't due for another 4 months, why not start at least creating a plan for that essay now? Even if it is not for a very long time in the future, your future self will thank you for it. And it will be very easier to write that essay in the end when you've given it so much thought now. Okay, so really try to do as much academic work possible in those theory times and use your placement times when you come home or on your days off. Research the things in placement that you didn't quite understand, the abbreviations that they use that you didn't quite understand, the conditions that you heard of that this baby had that you hadn't heard of before. Use your days off in placement to learn those kinds of things, not trying to cram in that essay that you could have done in the time in theory. Another useful thing a useful resource that I found was the All For Maternity website. Now they have a section called the Student Midwife Journal. And as Sue mentioned, I'm the co-editor of this journal, and they have so many useful resources for students. They have an anatomy and physiology section, which a lot of students mention that they struggle with. And they have over 50 e-learning modules, you know, for different topics relating to midwifery. So I'd really recommend everyone to check it out because it can help not only for assignments, but just for widening your midwifery knowledge in general, which is beneficial for everyone. So now about lectures. I think about lecture preparations, it can be quite hard because you don't really know fully what's going to be said until it's until it's said in the moment. However, you can ask your lecturers if they can share slides with you in advance of the lecture. And that's one big tip I would say, because you can actually print out the lectures, and you can do 3 slides per page, and they have little lines on the other side of it where you can annotate. And that's one big tip that I would give, because printing your slides in advance means that in the middle of the lecture, you're not scribbling down anything that's on the slide because you already have that. You can make your time on writing down the additional things that the lecturer is saying. So you don't have to focus on, oh, what's on the screen, let's take that down before they change the slide. You've already got that. You can really listen and comprehend what they're saying. So that's one tip I would give. Now, lectures have taken a bit of a different form now after COVID. They are Zoom lectures, and that's complicated a lot of things. So I did want to let you know a few tips of how to cope with Zoom lectures. I would say my number one tip is don't do them from your bed. As tempting as it might be, don't do them from your bed, because you can get distracted. You can do them in your bedroom, but maybe don't do it in your bed. Okay, try to have a set, this is my work environment, this is my rest environment, and that will really help you get into the mode, because you're not in a lecture theatre full of all of these students anymore. So you need to hold yourself accountable for your learning now. Another thing I would say is get up and stretch your legs every hour. Otherwise, you won't be able to concentrate. You know, you will get Zoom fatigue, which is a phrase that's been coined recently. Just Zoom after Zoom after Zoom, meeting after meeting, staring at a screen. People are getting headaches. People are getting tired. You need to stand up, hydrate, and move around. And then you can come back refreshed to carry on with that lecture. And my last tip would be, the thing with Zoom lectures is that you can use the chat function, you can raise your hand, so stay interactive. And in person, it can be quite daunting. I find it quite daunting sometimes to speak in front of everyone and ask a question. So the benefit of having Zoom lectures is that you can ask questions via the chat. You might be a bit afraid to say it in front of everyone by unmuting yourself, but you can just say it on to your lecturer directly, and they can answer it anonymously. So really make use of interactivity. And that leads me quite nicely onto the fact that I'd like to know if any of you have questions on anything that I've said. So pop a comment in the chat box, and all questions will be asked at the end. And on that note, I'll hand it back to Sophie.
Fabulous. Thank you, Nicolette. That's lovely. Thank you. I actually think that point about having a set place for your rest and a set place for working is a really good one, because I know that kind of made me think of when I used to try and study reading a book in bed. Never works. It just doesn't work, because you're in a different place and you can't take notes if you're lolling about in your bed. So thank you for adding that, Nicolette. And a good point. If you have questions for either of the speakers, please put it in and it'll come through. And I look over here because the questions will come to me to address to Nicolette and Deepa. So thank you, Nicolette. We'll be coming back to you. Now, next, I'm delighted to introduce Deepa Santosh, who's been with us before. She's a student midwife doing her pre-registration masters in midwifery at Oxford Brookes, and she'll tell you, I'm sure she's going to tell you more about including leading the baby-friendly project in a London trust. And she's done quite a lot of things as a student midwife and had quite an interesting pathway, which is I've included a little poster that she did for water and hydration for student midwives and midwives, which she might also touch upon. So welcome, Deepa. The screen is now yours.
Hello, hi everyone. My journey is a very unique and unconventional journey. So I am a mature student, as you know, is referred to. So in 2020, in the middle of a pandemic, I decided that I would do midwifery, and I was 45. So, you know, that amazes me when I say that number, but in my head, you know, I always feel so passionate about this. So age is just a number. 3 years down the line, I'm still going to be what I am. So, and I have a career of about 20-25 years. So, absolutely something that if you feel that, oh, have I missed the chance? I really want to do midwifery. No, you haven't. Jump on the boat. 10 years back, I did not know anything about midwifery. Only when I moved to England did I discover midwifery, because I started my career by working in a breastfeeding team in community, and I started working with postnatal midwives, and then slowly moved into hospital and saw what midwives are doing. And it just clicked that, oh my God, this is exactly what I want to do. This is somewhere that would make a difference to women and birthing people. So this is the journey that I want to take. It did take me a number of years after having that light bulb moment to actually get into midwifery, because I'm settling into a new country and there are certain things that I need to make sure happens before I jump into doing an education program. So meanwhile, I made sure that I kept myself constantly educating myself. So all the credentials that you had, Sue, mentioned, fortunately for me, was sponsored by the trust I was working with. So I'm quite grateful for that. And then made sure that I sort of grabbed those opportunities to keep myself updated and informed. So when you want to get into midwifery, if you haven't studied for, say, more than 5 years, then that could become a disadvantage. And this is one of the ways that you can keep yourself, updated, so you're actually not having to deal with that disadvantage when you actually want to apply. So I kept myself educated, kept myself, in the loop, so I knew exactly when I'd be able to apply. In terms of admission, so I applied through UCAS or I could apply to 5 universities, and also discovered that you can actually do a master's program, a pre-registration master's program in midwifery if you already have a bachelor's degree, and it actually can be any subject. So in the south of England, I think it was only Oxford Brookes. And Southampton had it, but I think they had kind of withdrawn that. And in the north, there are a few programs as well. So actually, if you have a bachelor's degree and if you're quite keen, you could do a pre-registration master's, because the practical element of the course is exactly the same as the bachelor's degree, but you will have extra things to do in terms of exams, in terms of clinical exams, as well as academic exams. You have extra work to do in terms of essays, and also you will be marked at a higher level. So year 2 will be marked at level 6, year 3 will be marked at level 7. So these are the differences between doing a bachelor's and a master's. But if you actually have a chance to do that, yes, go for it, because I feel quite well supported. I have not been to university in, 20-25 years, but I have studied all along. And actually, I feel quite supported by the university, the lecturers, my academic advisor, the librarians were brilliant to, make sure that, they have special programs if you need to upgrade your study skills and things like that. So actually keep you quite well supported. So it's not that daunting as you would think, because it's a master's degree. So through the admission process, I also realized that it's very important for you to choose the university that fits what you want. Yes, it is a very competitive degree. Yes, they are actually doing, a selection process, but you're also doing it the other way around. You want to look for things like how warm you feel in there. That's really, really important, because when you're having a problem later on, when you're doing your degree, you want that warmness, you want that support. So you want to understand, how warm are they? How much are they happy to support you in that admission process? Are they willing to talk to you? These things are really important. Where are the placement areas? How soon can you get to? Because if you're doing 13-hour shifts and then you have to spend another hour to travel home, that's going to be really difficult. So you want to understand that, this university, what are the placements and where I can go? And what is the flexibility around that? Are they willing to listen to you, to listen to what your circumstances are, and sort of, kind of tune as much as possible to make sure that you feel comfortable as well. So I would say it's a two-way process. So actually look at the university, look at the placement areas, and see what would suit yourself better. So having done all of that, And so with the 5 applications, 2 of the universities told me that I didn't have enough English and maths, which maths I did some 25 years back. They were evaluating me on something that I did 25 years back. It did not make any sense to me. But then I got 3 other universities who called me for an interview because they wanted to see the whole picture. They wanted to see what you come as a whole package. And that is what, maternity or midwifery is about. You don't look at one part of the thing. You want to look at the whole picture, the macro picture. So that way I was able to, then I got unconditional offers from 3 other universities, and eventually I picked the master's one. So, bear that in mind. If you don't get selected by the university, if you're getting a reject, if you're getting, challenge it. I did challenge it. So, there are ways in which you can challenge it. But at the same time, remember, you are what you are, and you need to find a university that fits you as well. So that's about the admission process. Now, being a student midwife, I get asked this question a lot. How do you cope when your classmates are far younger than you? And I'll tell you, my son joined university the same year I did. So I have classmates as old as my son, right? And in midwifery, it's very common to have an entire spectrum of age. And when I went into shift last time, my very sweet supervisor told me, "Are you the oldest in the cohort?" And I proudly said, "Yes, I am." And at no point do I feel, worried about it, because initially there was some anxiety, but my classmates are brilliant, and I just love them for that, because they keep me organized. They tell me, what folders to buy, how to organize my record of midwifery achievements, how I need to plan my, day, and all of these things I get from someone who's 20 years younger than me, 15 years younger than me, and I really love it because they kind of sort me out around that. And then in exchange, I can give them all the knowledge that I've gained over the last 10, 12 years. So it works really well, and I really thank them for that, because I've never made to feel, different or separate. I just blend in with them whenever we go, either whenever we get a chance to go out or even in uni. So don't be worried about being a mature student. It's absolutely possible to be in uni even at my age. Now, as being a student midwife, there are a few things. Nicolette has explained a lot of things to you. There are a few things that I will say. When you go into placement for the first time, for the first few weeks, observe what is happening. Just take it all in, absorb it. Don't put too much pressure on yourself to, I don't know how to do a blood pressure monitoring, or I can't find the vein, or, I don't know what I'm doing. Don't worry too much about all of this. Your supervisor will make you as comfortable as, it's your first time in midwifery. So just observe what is happening, and then you will learn it by doing it, but also know that you will make mistakes, and that's fine, because you have your supervisor next to you. If you cannot hear, when you're trying to measure somebody's blood pressure, and if you can't hear the sounds you're meant to hear, it's fine. You can say, I can't hear anything, and then she will kind of sort it out for you. And that's really important, to give yourself that chance. You will make mistakes, you will learn. Don't put pressure on yourself. Just let it, and then soon, suddenly, everything starts clicking. Everything starts working. It's magical, but it happens, because the one thing you need to do is to take every opportunity to do that. And that's important. Don't be worried about, I did not do it last time, because this is constantly in your head as well. I couldn't get blood from the lady before. I don't want to do it next time. And that can run in your head. Try and overcome that. Talk to your supervisor. And so many of them were like, "Okay, Diet Deepa, do you want to take blood from me?" So this is what happens in practice. They want to make sure that you're learning, and you don't have to be afraid of making that mistake. So that's one thing. The next thing is, you're not just a student, and I hear this a lot. I hear people apologizing for asking a question. So I'm really sorry, but can you explain this to me? All right, you don't have to apologize. You are there to learn. You are a student. So you actually say, I did not understand that. Could you please explain that to me? Or why does it work this way, right? So when you keep apologizing for learning, it sort of gets in your head, and at certain points you feel you don't want to be asking. You don't have to do that. You are a student. So just, go ahead and ask those questions. Just time it rightly. Maybe not in front of the person with whom, a pregnant woman or a partner and things like that. Maybe just, after they've left, have a quick conversation to say, oh, could you explain that to me, please? And it's as simple as that. They are willing to do that. But, ask those questions, and it's a learning process. And that's really important for you to understand. You're not just a student, you're the future midwife. And we need to learn so that we can become the future, right? So that's another thing. I would say, apart from what's happening academically and in practice, try to enrich yourself. And the way you can enrich yourself, and this is something that I've done, is by attending conferences. Now, COVID, the benefit of COVID is that so many of those are online now, just like we are today. And plenty of them are free for students or very nominal. So, find yourselves conferences. In fact, there are Facebook groups where you can actually look up, say, midwifery conferences and study days. So there are groups like that. There are pages like that. So follow those. So you actually can pick up what are the most, there are so many educative, informative conferences, webinars, and podcasts as well. So my favorite is the Midwife Cauldron. That I love hearing to that. And the other one is called ObsPod. This is by an obstetrician in London, and she's like an honorary midwife. So, I love listening to Dr. Florence. So choose what appeals to you, find something. And when you're traveling, it's nice to pick up these extra learning, because then when you go into and you say you're learning about perineal tears, you know what's happening in the latest around that subject. And you can pick that up quite well by doing these things. And I use Twitter a lot, so use social media for that purpose. Twitter, you get, updates. You can follow people who are experts in that subject, and they can keep you updated. And this will go a long way once you qualify as well, or through the next 3 years. So, this is a way you can enrich yourself apart from what's happening, normally at uni or at placement. So that's something that I do regularly. When you're in placement or when you're in uni, you are going to have minor irritants, frustrations, feeling angry, or, there are moments going to be like that. And I always tell myself, eyes on the goal, don't let the minor irritations or the frustrations sort of affect you, because you want to tell yourself that I'm above that and I'm going to achieve what I want to achieve. So it's really important to tell yourself the eyes on the goal. That doesn't mean that you ignore something that you really feel you need to call out. So like Sue mentioned the water campaign, and I really felt bad for students, midwives, other healthcare professionals who are literally doing their jobs, being dehydrated for no reason whatsoever. So things like that, you can actually start a campaign. You can have the support of your university, your academic advisor. You can speak to the trust. You can speak to the ward matron. And there are also people who are called as speaking up champions. So if you're having any issues, any difficulties, and if you see something that is wrong in the way the service is delivered, call it out. If you don't feel brave enough to do it to the person, that's fine. That's absolutely okay. None of us feel brave about it, but try and tackle it in a more formal way, and then, sort of get it addressed. And many times it doesn't even come back to you because it could be done anonymously as well. So I have done that, and I have seen change happening. I've seen improvements as a student. So really important for you to know that literally you're the eyes and ears of the service. I wish trusts would talk to student midwives, because they can actually get the pulse of their service by talking to us. Okay. And lastly, I would say, take time out for yourself. This is not an easy course. We all know that it can get quite overwhelming at times, and you can feel that burning out sensation when literally nothing is going inside. Recognize that, take a step back, don't sit with your books during the weekend or when you get a day or two out of placement. Go out. I do cycling, and during summer I used to do some kayaking and things like that. So take time out for yourself, something that recharges you. Put midwifery away for a bit. And that's really important, that need to recharge so that you can come back full on and, take as much as you can. And I keep doing that regularly, and that's what keeps me going. So these are my tips, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions. Do put it out in the chat for me. Thank you very much.
That's wonderful, Deepa. Thank you so much. Gosh, I feel very privileged. You've both spoken so beautifully and given so much information to anyone who's listening, who wants to become a student, but also people who are actually students at the moment. And that might include actually midwives who are doing further courses also, because I think some of those tips are just kind of evergreen, really. They could fit several different agendas, especially the looking after yourself, the selecting your university. We've had the rest and work areas from Nicolette, and planning has been a huge part of, for both of you speaking. What really comes through is not just your deep commitment to becoming midwives, but your planning and the way you're organizing yourselves, and even organizing your kind of physical and mental well-being deeper. And that was fantastic. So thank you so much. Now, I know there's some questions coming through. Yes. And so we've got some. Okay, I believe Jacqueline Dunkley-Bent is with us or watching. So hi, Jacqueline, hope everything's well with you. We've got some questions coming through now. So I'll have to look at, there's quite a lot of questions actually today. So we've got, first of all, Liv, hi Liv, says, any tips for postnatal ward for the first placement? Shall we try Nicolette, because you've had a little rest?
Okay, hi, yeah, postnatal ward. I remember my first postnatal ward placement. I think the tips that I would say is try to learn how to take blood. I know it sounds like a really big daunting thing to do, but I think observe first, like Deepa said, observe first, make sure you understand all your anatomy and physiology. And I think postnatal ward is a good place to get started on that, because sometimes we'll take blood to check the iron levels. So really just like try and use that opportunity to get to grips with that experience. As well, in postnatal ward, you will learn a lot about documentation. Documentation is really, really important in midwifery. Everything you do, you really need to learn how to write, and you need to know how to write it correctly and in the right form. Now, in postnatal ward, you're not only documenting for your care for the mother, but you're caring for the baby as well. So you're not only asking questions about, I don't know, any wounds that they have, and like how they're feeling emotionally, to see if the uterus is well contracted. You're not only documenting your postnatal assessment from the mum, you're assessing how is the baby, have they passed urine or meconium yet, what's their feeding behavior like. So you need to really work on your documentation. Use that time in postnatal ward to really get to grips with how I can write a really good summary of care for both patients ultimately in your care, how to really get to grips with writing a clear takeover in that way.
And I think that's really important to emphasize that you don't have just one patient, and I'm using hospital language, but you don't have one client. You've got one and maybe two if you've got two other babies. So it's important to make sure you've got look after mother and baby the same. That's fabulous. Thank you, Nicolette. Now I've got another question, and this is from Ruth Sanderson Craw. Hi, Ruth. And she's saying she's a mum of two thinking of applying for midwifery. Do you think it's possible to balance the two and stay sane? That's a good question, Ruth. And I know there's a lot of people who've been asking a similar question, because sometimes the reason why people want to come into midwifery is because they've had either a fantastic experience, we hope it is, or not such a good experience. They want to come and change things. So maybe Well, let's start with Deepa. What do you think, Deepa? Can you stay sane if you've got children and you're doing midwifery?
I'll say that I have plenty of classmates who are doing that. Mine are grown up, so I left it till they were grown up. But I have plenty of classmates who are doing that, and I think again the planning part of it. So they always say in terms of childcare, and that's the biggest thing. You want to have a plan A, B, C, D. When your normal childcare doesn't happen, then who can you count on? Do you have someone who can actually, you ring them and say, I'm really exhausted, can you keep my children for, things like that. You have close family, close friends who can actually support you, and then you can organize that sort of planning is really important, I think. And hats off to people who do it with children, but they do it. And and I've seen that my classmates have regular nursery options. So even if they are on uni days, they will, like in the time when we were doing it over Zoom, they still had their children in nursery, so they can actually apply their head to what they're learning. So I would say, have those options for childcare that can be, easily accessed, and you will feel the guilt. I mean, all of us feel it. We are, I think, tuned to that. It doesn't matter what the age of your children are, but of course, when they're tiny, you feel it even more. But I think you will be inspirational to them if you start doing it. And everybody's situation is unique. Some people are able to wait, and other people not so much. But it's completely up to you. But it's still doable. I do have classmates who can do that.
Wonderful, thank you. That I hope that helps, Ruth, so you're with your question. That's fantastic. Now I've got a question from Edith KK. This question is to both of you, this one. Thank you, Edith, which is, there's a lot of discussion on equality and diversity at present. As both being of ethnic minorities, if you forgive the term, do you feel that you are both treated fairly and equally during your training? If not, what were the challenges and what would your advice be to others? And forgive that, I mean, I know that the term BAME is still being used, but I know there are different terms like black and brown and
that's okay.
Different groups.
Yeah, I think it just gets very confusing. So I don't have a problem with that. I am the only South Asian in my course. I do have another student who's of the Black ethnicity, and we did have, I think, in terms of the admission process, you can see that there can be some differences if you're not following the conventional route, and you need to understand how you can get over that. But I have not faced any inequalities. However, in practice during placement, I have seen people who belong to that ethnicity or different ethnicities, midwives are actually not treating them as equally as you would do, somebody who you're fairly used to as in like a white person, because there is not much diversity in the community. So I have been able to raise those issues, and action has been taken to make sure that that equality is addressed. So personally, I don't feel any different, and in fact, I'm quite happy to say that I don't feel any different at all. But in terms of placement, I have seen it to the women who we are, who are the service users, and action has been taken upon feedback.
And of course, that's very important with the information that we know about Black and brown women being more likely to have morbidity and mortality. So addressing it right at the beginning is really fantastic. Nicolette, how about you? What would your
so I'm of a Black Caribbean background, and I would say that for me, I'm training in London, so a lot of our like people of the other people of our cohort are of a similar ethnicity to me. It's very diverse where I'm training, not only in the student midwife population, but also in terms of just the people who we care for. We have a very diverse clientele in London. So I do think that for me, I haven't had negative experiences in that way directed towards me. But I will say that there is still things to be said about decolonizing midwifery education. So that doesn't mean that I've had negative experiences directed at me as a student midwife, but I would say that even just our language that we use in midwifery, it can be diversified to recognize, you know, that there aren't only white women giving birth, for example. Like even when we do our postnatal assessments, when we assess people's skin color, we check the color of the baby, the tone of the baby, all these things, and we say pink. But what if the baby's skin color isn't pink? You know, just little things like that. It's normalizing differences in skin color. I think it's just so part of our words nowadays that we don't recognize how it can be different. In terms of the midwifery education side, I would say that there is progress being made, and I will say that, and I will applaud that, but more in that direction needs to be done in terms of the skills labs trainings that we use. We have the little dolls that we kind of practice on. So abdominal examination, we practice on these dolls and we try and practice those skills, or suturing, we practice the skills on sewing up the little dolls. And the thing is that these things can look different when there's different skin tones. So I would encourage more training to reflect just the different people that we look after, and the models that we use to reflect that as well.
It's taken a long time to be changing that. I mean, all of the things like images and pictures. I think someone was on Twitter the other day talking about their child having, or there being foot and mouth in the child's school, and all the images that are available are of white kids, rather than, so you wouldn't know what a child of color might look like if they had foot and mouth. I wouldn't, you know, that was, we have to keep on working on this. We really do. That's fantastic.
Exactly.
Fantastic.
With jaundice as well. If you think about with jaundice, I think that obviously we use some more like objective tools to recognize jaundice, but when you think of a person of color, a baby of color, I think that a lot of midwives are less confident in trying to assess jaundice to a baby that's not white. So that's really important for not de-skilling and relying on technology to pick up these things, but also to train our midwives to say, this is how it looks, and this is how it looks, you know.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. I must say the student midwives are more aware of this now, and actually are telling practicing midwives, actually, you know, this is not the right, because they are more aware of it now. And in fact, there's been feedback to lecturers even, and they have tried to source pictures and change their language toward that. That's really good to see that happening.
It is. I think it's challenging the taken for granted, that we've just taken it for granted for years. So it's very healthy, actually. So thank you for that, answering that so brilliantly. Now, okay, so thank you, Edith, for starting us off on that one. And Jenny Hall wants the answers from both you too. Question for you both: what tips would you like to give to lecturers and practice supervisors? I think you'd have to have 2 little tips each. So should we start with Nicolette?
Okay, yeah. For practice supervisors, I would say that it's quite hard. It can be quite hard because now we don't have a system of mentoring. We have a system of like practice supervisors, and you might dip around different placement areas, have different supervisors. So you don't really necessarily know when you're going to see that person next. And it can be quite difficult to get your MPAD, or whatever you call it. Different universities call their things different things, but the book that you need to get to show your progress, to get that signed off on the skills. If you see us do it and you see us being confident, don't be afraid to sign our book and say that you've seen us do it, and don't just say, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, or I'll do it next week, because we'll never see you again. And it turns out that you won't show that particular skill the next one. You'd be like, oh, I've done it before though. So really just try to remember when you were a student, ultimately, in the nicest way possible. Remember that we all start from the same place, and you were a student once. So just try and be patient. And thing is, I've had practice supervisors before when I've asked some questions and I felt like they might have taken it the wrong way and been very actually defensive in their practice, like, oh, you do it because that's how it should be done, or and it's like, oh no, I'm not asking because I'm saying you're doing it wrong. I genuinely need to know the rationale so I can learn, because I need to understand why I'm doing the things I'm doing. Of course, from a learning perspective, I don't want to be one of those people who just blindly follow. I need to know the rationale. Why do we do it this way? So I would say my tip to practice supervisors is to be patient and understand that we need to learn and sign our books, please, when you can.
We get the message about the books. Okay, how about Deepa? 2 wee tips from Deepa.
In terms for lecturers, I think in terms of this blended learning approach now, I mean, we are going into uni more, but we still have the Zoom meetings, and, you know, to actually make it much more interactive. So rather than putting, you know, I don't know, 1,000 slides out there and constantly talking about it, it's some of my lecturers are quite good at it. They have like games over it. They've got the interactive, different sorts of interacting pods that you can use, and we also do group discussion within those rooms. So if you're doing a lot of teaching online, it's really important to make it interactive, because Zoom fatigue, like Nicola said, is a real thing, and you can end up, you know, sort of being like a haze out there. So it's so important to try and make it interactive. Sometimes, you know, there's childlike things when you're learning. Oh, are they let me participate? Oh, you know, things like that is actually quite useful. And also, if you're like an academic advisor, to check in on your student, you know, from time to time, to see how they're feeling, and to actually have open doors. So if there's an email sent, that there's a response within a reasonable amount of time, or you're actually able to be empathetic to what's happening in their lives. And I think that's really important, particularly with COVID. So there was a point of time when, you know, last year I just could not go to placement on a particular day because I had some bad news coming. You know, my close friend had died, and it was so really important for me, for everyone to understand that my head was not in the right place, and they gave me that space and time. So and everyone asked me how I was and told me to take it easy and come back only when I feel like it. And it said, we can work things out for you, don't worry about that. And that was really, really important. In terms of practice supervisors, oh, that big book is so big. And I do pity supervisors, because not only are they taking care of women, and they also have to answer questions and all of that, but it might be a really good idea if you're, you know, able to exactly sign those proficiencies off. Now, the second year is changing. It's saying you need to contribute to care with decreasing supervision. And, you know, and I've only worked with that person one shift. So I can understand where it comes from. But, you know, maybe take the time in middle of that entire 12.5-hour shift to say, let's put aside 15 minutes to talk about, you know, what you want to achieve today. Have you done that? And then, you know, do you want me to start signing that for you? And that's so important. And, you know, I've had a couple of days where I wanted to run away after 12.5-hour shift, you know. So it's both ways, but it makes sense to understand. Like, many of my supervisors ask me, right, what do you want to achieve today? Tell me what you want to do. And from a student perspective, is also to tell the supervisor, these are the things I can do, and these are the things I would like to get signed off, so that you sort of make a plan and work together about it. And please, please, please do write us feedback, because I know there's a system of leaving it out for supervisors. Sometimes you email them, sometimes you leave it in a folder on the ward, but the chasing, and, you know, it's never ending. So if you can take 5 minutes to write that feedback, because that's the only way we can show progress to our practice assessor to get signed off. So do write our feedbacks. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So we've got the planning, we've got paperwork and record keeping, and a plea for people to sign those books, whether they're called a MORA or whether they're called what's the other name for these
MPAD.
things? MPAD, that's it. How could I forget? Because I know they're trying to make sure they're very similar, especially in line with the new proficiencies, which I always advertise when we're here together. Now, we might have a question for Well, we've had a question about, someone was asking about timesheets and proficiency. So I think we might have answered that one question. And Deepa said, and Amanda, sorry, says, Deepa, do you find your age affects your energy? For example, night shifts. She's not that old, you know.
I won't lie. I mean, it does. I mean, I thought it affected me. So when the way I reacted to night shifts, so when I did my first 12.5-hour night shift, I told my supervisor, this is my first night shift, you know, and they said, don't worry, we'll take care of you. You know, it's sort of, you know, they're very understanding about that. Even the 12.5-hour day shift, I was petrified of it. But you're so busy. You don't know what's going on, what time it is, you know, whether it's night or day, or, you know, and if you have that enthusiasm to learn, and, you know, midwifery is so interesting, you just lose yourself in there. Yes, your feet will hurt. And again, I'll tell you, this is what I told Sue last time, trainers, your footwear, they are really, really important. Take care of your feet. And, you know, if you wear the proper footwear, if you drink water, make sure you're, you know, keeping yourself hydrated. It doesn't matter where you are. And if you have those little, you know, snacks and sweets, sometimes on delivery seat, I do take a fudge cake slice for a night shift, and that's fine. That's my way of survival. If you love fruits, those are really good as well. It's light, but it keeps you energized as well. So these are different things you can do. Once you you know, once you do a few shifts, then it sort of becomes, yeah, I can do this. It is tiring, but my other classmates have told me, Deepa, it's not just you. I feel totally exhausted as well. So actually, I don't think age matters. As long as you're healthy, you're fit. And I tried to get myself into shape before I joined the program. I did lose some weight and all of that, but it's quite doable.
Okay, I think you'd have to go easy on the fudge cake. Because I would say one of the things that I found is when I moved from being a nurse into being a student midwife is you didn't move in the same ways as a student midwife. There's a more, though you're busy, there is more waiting, isn't there? Especially in the birthing room. Anyway, thank you for that. It's lovely. We've not got a lot of time for more questions, but I'm going to allow a couple more. I've got a question from Jane Marshall. Hi Jane, nice to hear from you. Who says, with all the pressures in practice, what advice would you give to students about keeping positive and not being drawn into the politics of the practice setting? How about Nicolette? I'll pull.
Wow, that's a very good question. I think it can be difficult. I think it can be difficult to not get negative. I think especially what's going on right now in the hospitals with like staff shortages and stuff like that. Midwives are under a lot of pressure at the moment. And I think that it is affecting the mood, it's affecting the atmosphere. And as a newcomer into the environment, it's very easy to think, oh gosh, what have I gotten myself into? Everyone seems really upset here. But I think it's important to stay positive and to remember your why. You came into midwifery for a reason. You didn't come into midwifery for, necessarily a full staffed ward. I know that we deserve that and we should have that, but you came into midwifery because you have a passion for looking after that person in labour or in antenatally or postnatally. Do you know what I'm trying to say? So really that element is still there. So the way you retain your positivity is knowing that I'm here doing what I love every day, so try and tune out the negative comments, which you will hear, and they are valid. But I think just stay true to why you're doing the job.
Fabulous. How about Deepa?
The way it affects you as a student is what can happen is, I'm only talking about the stress of the services now and the way it's stretched. It can become very task oriented. So as a student, you're going and doing 10 CTGs that day, but you're not really having a chance to sit down and talk about why you're doing a CTG, or, to actually understand the CTG. And what are the other things that's going on around that? This is just one example. So it can become very task-oriented and just repetitively doing the same task, not knowing whether you're doing it right or wrong. So, and when that happens, you need to sort of have that conversation with your supervisor to say, oh, actually, I've done a number of tasks today, but actually have not had a chance to understand it or discuss it. And I would like to know, take that opportunity to talk to them. And when you actually tell them that, they can step back and they can take a few minutes and then explain things to you. And if that's not happening with your supervisor, you go to your practice assessor or your academic advisor. And that's one thing that I've noticed, that it can become too many tasks and you're not really understanding why you're doing that and is this the right way of doing that. So just make sure that you're not there you're not there as an extra body. You're not there to answer all the buzzers and constantly do things. Yes, do that, but that's not you're told that's not why you're there. You're there to learn. So you need, if that's hitting you, then it'd be good for you to take action over it. And about the whatever is happening in maternity, like Nicolette says, is quite valid, but it can affect you. And sometimes I just gently walk out of there. And that's something to save myself. And I've told this, I cannot let myself become overwhelmed. I only have one chance at this, and I keep my eyes on the goal. And if I hear that, and if I feel that's affecting me, I step back, I look into my book, or I read about the women I'm taking care of, or the cases and things like that. I sort of step back, because right now it's not my place. I'll deal with it 2 years later.
Well, and things may improve. Change. Because I mean, as you were talking about sort of moving into task orientated, it made me feel and think about the sessions we've had from midwives talking in very continuity of care type models. And you kind of think, well, if you're doing these tasks and being task oriented, so the midwives, it must be very negative for them. So breaking the cycle, which is what it felt like Nicolette was really pointing to, felt as though it was a quite a good move. So thank you for that. There's one last question now. And look, there's lots of questions, but I'm going to have Becca. Hi, Becca. She says, I suffer with a lack of confidence on placement and other students have previously come in and taken over, making me feel even worse. How would you advise dealing with this? Gosh, that's a tricky problem. Has that happened to either of you?
Yeah. I have. Go on, Nicolette, you can go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it is tricky because I also had quite low confidence at the start of my course, and especially because of the interruptions with COVID. When I came back, I was a second year, but I felt very much still in my first year in terms of my practice. Very shy, didn't speak up for myself maybe when I should have. So I have had situations where students were a lot more confident than me, come in and be like, oh, I'll take the delivery. And you're like, oh, okay. So I think, you need to learn how to find your voice at some points. But as well, you need to recognize that we're all at different points of our training. Just like COVID affected my midwifery education, it affected theirs. So the third years, at the time that I was younger, the third years, they were massively running behind on their deliveries. They need to get 40 and they're trying to get as many they can to graduate. And I think it is kind of the culture where the third years are the priorities, and then you will eventually get that privilege when you become third year. So I know it feels like sometimes it's frustrating when people come and step in and step on your toes a little bit, but as you progress through your training, they'll recognize, oh, maybe you're a little bit behind on your births, so maybe you should be the one who takes the lead now. So it will come to help you in the future.
Okay. How about Deepa?
I think it's important to emphasize that this is your journey. Please, as much as possible, don't compare yourself to another person. And that's really important. They can have different needs. They have different ways of achieving things. You have a different plan for yourself. This is your journey, and you pace yourself for that. And you're always going to have this pressure of, births and things like that. But like Nicolette said, it'd be taken care of. Don't worry too much about it. But if it is actually affecting you, it's happened a couple of times to you, then I would advise you to go back to your academic advisor. There have been situations like that, and we have been sent like generic emails to say that this is how it needs to happen. Please do not jump in when there's another student there and things like that. That's so you can rectify it by giving that feedback to your academic advisor, who can act on that.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you. I hope that helps, Becca. I mean, I think the other thing is we need to think about is the mother and the family and what they think. And if you have someone suddenly just walking in before you know, she's really got to know the woman, and you've been looking after that woman for 11 hours, for example, or 10 hours, you might need to think about who, and your midwife, I'm sure, will think, who is the best person to look after this woman and her baby. But it's quite multifaceted and quite complicated. Now, I could listen to Nicolette and Deepa forever, actually. And the time we've run over a little bit, so I'm so sorry to people who are watching, but we couldn't resist. And there's still questions which we'll try and answer at the end of the session, after the session. But I need to kind of bring this one to an end. But I'm going to say we must have Nicolette and Deepa back in the future, maybe a little bit further down the line as they're entering as fully I'm thinking about a chrysalis and a butterfly coming out, 2 butterflies coming out as midwives, because I think everyone who's watching will agree they are fantastic and they will be fantastic midwives. And that's backed up by Jacqueline Dunkley-Bent, our chief midwife, who's tweeted, brilliant session, a great end to a busy day, hashtag inspired by these amazing student midwives, hashtag thank you, Deepa, loved hearing about your experience as a mature student, such wise guidance shared. That's lovely, isn't it? And Nicolette, your insight into clinical assessment of black and brown skin was very insightful. So isn't that lovely? Thank you so much, Jacqueline, for joining us, and thank you to everyone else who has joined us this evening. It's been fantastic. I just want to remind you that you will be able to get the records of this, and there'll be the recordings will be going out a bit later in the week and will be accessible after that time. And next week it's going to be edited highlights from the 2 fabulous festivals coming up. And I'm reminding you, the Student Midwife Experience Festival on the 10th, online Zoom. Remember, if you haven't registered, get registering. Or if you're an educator or a midwife, the Midwifery Education Conference also on the 10th. And both of which Jacqueline Dunkley-Bent is going to be speaking, so you don't want to miss that. And then the Scottish Maternity and Midwifery Festival is on the 23rd of November. It's another hybrid event, so it's in Edinburgh and online, so do sign up for that. So a big thank you to our wonderful speakers, to Deepa and to Nicolette, and good luck, Nicolette, for your whatever's going to happen over the next couple of days with nursing times. And in the meantime, to our audience, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for the fabulous questions and for joining us this evening. Stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you next week.
One of the benefits, I think, of a platform like this is that if you are busy clinically, or if you can't watch or listen or engage real time, you can do this at other times. So that is fabulous for such a time as this. So delighted to be with you all, albeit virtually on the screen. My name is Jacqueline Dunkley-Bent. I'm the Chief Midwifery Officer for the NHS in England.
So this is what's called a hybrid event. There are people in the room, there are people watching in groups around the country, and there are people still watching in their pajamas at home. Good morning, Sue, how are you?
Good morning, I'm fine, Neil, thank you very much. It's fantastic to be here.
My argument is that the solution is health optimization. Prevention is far better than cure.
And I think there is a real risk that services that are lost or reduced during the time of COVID are not restored.
And I hope that you can take valuable insights from today. And if you're listening tonight, or if you're listening next week or next month, Take valuable insights from the speakers from today and share the word, share the positive messages with your colleagues, because in these dark times, in these challenging times, everybody needs a green shoot and a pearl of wisdom. Thank you very much, and we are in this together. We stand united together.